Hello, Cancerman COINTELPRO. I'm coming on because I saw the opportunity to go ahead and show this. I'm going to do it. We were discussing a while back in my blog TV chat the film We Were Soldiers, and I brought up this scene where Mel Gibson's character, he's portraying Hal Moore, Colonel Hal Moore, and it's in the aftermath of the engagement in the Idrang Valley at Landing Zone X-Ray. He's being debriefed by General McNamara, by Secretary of Defense McNamara and General Westmoreland. And it's very interesting because he kind of predicts the outcome of the Vietnam War in this one scene, and this did actually happen. This is a true story. Every bit of it is absolutely true. Hal Moore apparently understanding the enemy more than the brass in Washington did. Of course, as is the case with most wars, where you have troops on the ground and you have politicians running the war from, thousands of miles away. But I really wish they had left this scene in the film. I really do, because it kind of summed it all up and put it all into perspective. But I'm going to go ahead and show it now, because I've talked about it and I wanted people to see it. And a lot of people, when they watch movies like this, they don't look through deleted scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this on and let you guys take a look at it.
Congratulations, Colonel. Mr. Secretary, Colonel Hal Moore. Colonel Moore? Secretary of Defense. Colonel, you have the thanks of your whole country, especially mine and those of the President. Have a seat. You won a victory that's inspired us all and made us sure that will ultimately prevail here in Vietnam.
Well, my men are the finest that have ever worn the uniform, sir.
We know that. And they dismembered the enemy. 79 dead against 1,800 to 2,000. That's in the range of 22.8 to 26.2 to 1.
Sir, if you'll permit me, one of my men found this in the battlefield. It's sent it to me as I had it translated. Oh, my dear young wife, when the troops come home after the victory and you do not see me, please look at the proud colors. You will see me there, and you will feel warm under the shadow of the bamboo tree. This from a young NBA soldier who tried to kill me with a bayonet. This man had a life worth living, and he gave it up in a heartbeat.
Dedicated enemy, which makes your victory even more commendable.
Indeed.
We're requesting 40,000 more troops. Because of what your men have proven, we think the President will look favorably on our request. We'll run these little bastards back home.
Sir, they pushed 2,000 men through artillery and napalm. And they came willingly. They charged the muzzles of our rifles, and we took them hand to hand any way we could. And we won. Hell, we slaughtered them. But they didn't see it that way. They just retreat, and then they'd come again. We won't run the little bastards back home, sir. They are home.
Now you can see why I think that it should have been left in, being that he basically summed up the entire Vietnam War in that brief statement. And the individuals who were in power at the time, the politicians, weren't interested in hearing the truth. They wanted to hear a victory. They wanted to be guaranteed victory. They thought they could win. And if you recall, when one looks back at World War II and thinks about the tremendous carnage that was present in the Pacific War against the Japanese, one thing in Asian culture is they're not going to roll over for you or for anybody. They don't care if you're their enemy and you're coming to kill them or take something from them. They will kill themselves to take you with them. And that's just one of the things that's kind of ingrained into their culture. And it's a different type of war when you're dealing in areas like that. We saw it in the Korean War. We had to drop 2 nuclear weapons on Japan before they finally gave up. And even then they didn't want to. So this is very...
The first Vietnamese Catholic parish in the United States sits right outside Washington, in Arlington, Virginia. Holy Martyrs of Vietnam Parish was dedicated in 1979 and originally served the Vietnamese population that moved into the area in 1975 from a refugee camp in Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania.
Đức Chúa đã cứu dân người, số còn sót lại của Israel.
Dr. Tu Bui has been active in the parish since its inception.
Ephraim chính là con trưởng. What I see here is a lot of spirit, of fellowship, of good activities for everybody. We drove.
Very interesting that they filmed this and that they took this out of the movie. They took this out of the film. I'm going to go ahead and take a look one more time because I've got a little bit of time on this video. I'm going to check something out here that I've never really paid a whole lot of attention to before. Yeah, this film came out in 2002. We Were Soldiers came out in 2002. And I specifically believe that the reason why they took that scene out of the film was because they knew that we were involved in a war that was going to grow unpopular. And they didn't want to send the wrong message. I believe that 100%. That's one thing that you can certainly tell. When there's a war going on, you can actually see that reflected in Hollywood. One way to actually, if you want to go back and look at a Vietnam War movie that was really little more than propaganda in favor of the war, one can look at the film The Green Beret starring John Wayne. If you haven't seen it, and you don't mind suffering through a horrible film, then I think you should check that movie out if you haven't seen it already. It's the Green Berets is the most blatant example of propaganda that I have ever seen. To the point where when I was taking political science at the university, that was one of the films that we had to actually view during our studies of propaganda. And propaganda through the mass media and the entertainment industry. So, yeah, if you want to take a look at that one kind of goes the opposite way. We Were Soldiers is kind of showing, that scene that I just showed you in We Were Soldiers is more showing more of the true realistic aspect of it, of what war is, what it represents, and why you shouldn't go to war unless absolutely necessary, unless you're being threatened. And that goes back to St. Thomas Aquinas' just war theory, or just war doctrine, being that the only just war is a war that is in self-defense. This is Cancer Man COINTELPRO, out.
The slaughter of civilians for sport, weapons smuggling, destruction of evidence, wholesale corruption, and finally murder. In our third story in the countdown, a full-fledged criminal enterprise executed by the military contractors known formerly as Blackwater, according to the sworn testimony of two of its employees. The Nation's Jeremy Scahill, who broke the story, joins us in a moment. The details come straight from two sworn affidavits filed late last night by persons whose identities have been sealed to protect their identity, men who have previously cooperated with federal prosecutors in the criminal inquiry into Blackwater. From John Doe number 2, a former member of Blackwater's management team, quoting the affidavit, it appears that Mr. Eric Prince, Blackwater's founder, and his employees murdered or had murdered one or more persons who have provided information or who were planning to provide information to the federal authorities about the ongoing criminal conduct. On several occasions after my departure from Mr. Prince's employ, Mr. Prince's management has personally threatened me with death and violence. John Doe number 2 also stating that Mr. Prince, pictured here, smuggled unlawful weapons into Iraq, including sawed-off semi-automatic machine guns with silencers and illegal hand grenades. And the affidavit also says that Prince, quote, views himself as a Christian crusader eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe. To that end, Mr. Prince intentionally deployed to Iraq certain men who shared his vision of Christian supremacy. Many of these men used call signs based on the Knights of the Templar, the warriors who fought the Crusades. Mr. Prince operated his companies in a manner that encouraged and rewarded the destruction of Iraqi life. Going to Iraq to shoot and kill Iraqis was viewed as a sport or game. Strikingly similar allegations made in the affidavit of John Doe number 1, a former U.S. Marine who worked for Blackwater in Iraq. He alleges that incidents of unjustified deadly force were initially videotaped and watched in a session called a hot wash. Blackwater, now known as Z Services, spelled XE, maintains that Mr. Prince and the company are innocent of any wrongdoing and performed their duties on behalf of their employer, the State Department. Joining me now, as promised, the contributor to The Nation magazine and author of Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army, Jeremy Scahill. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me back, Keith.
As horrific as all this sounds, it's just part of what you described in the piece today. Flesh it out for us.
Well, I mean, obviously, to hear the term murder and Blackwater in the same sentence is no great surprise, particularly to people who've been following the history of this company. It's been at the center of some of the worst violence in Iraq, killing civilians repeatedly. 5 of its men are going to be tried on manslaughter charges for the Nicer Square massacre in Baghdad in September of '07. Another one pled guilty. The Congress is investigating. The IRS is investigating. This is a scandal-plagued company. What is explosive about what's happened here, and you just went through some of the most explosive of these details, is that you have 2 former Blackwater officials. I have learned from sources that John Doe number 2 was actually in Blackwater management and was privy to some of the inner workings of the company. Eric Prince, the owner of Blackwater, remains the sole owner of the company no matter that he stepped down as CEO and the founder of the company. He micromanages every aspect of Blackwater's operations, and that's been well known. On the Christian supremacist angle, let's remember that Eric Prince viewed Blackwater as a neo-crusader force and has from the beginning. This is a guy who comes from one of the powerhouse families of the radical religious right. His father was a major bankroller and gave the seed money to Gary Bauer to start the Family Research Council. James Dobson focused on the family. And then we have his forces deployed in Iraq as part of a war against a Muslim nation that George Bush characterized as a crusade. What we have here, Keith, is a confirmation from insiders at Blackwater that, in fact, Eric Prince did have a neo-crusader agenda and, most explosively, may have murdered or facilitated the murder of individuals that were intending to or did cooperate in the federal government's criminal investigation of Blackwater. This is deadly serious.
All right, to the murder in a second, but you mentioned something in here that strikes an obvious question. How could the Bush administration, the State Department, have missed this crusader element here, or was that what they were looking for?
Missed it? I think it was considered a plus in the Bush White House. Remember, Keith, what we had here was the Bush administration essentially create a force that acted as an armed wing of the administration, not subject to the military command, not subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that